creativity come from? What's the connection between creativity and consciousness? Does expanding your consciousness increase your creativity? For centuries, the Western world believed that creativity and creative inspirations originated with external supernatural beings, such as a muse. The artist wasn't creative themselves. They were simply the tool used by an external entity to manifest their desires. Creative works were an external gift bestowed upon them rather than internally generated. Eventually, Sigmund Freud came to the conclusion that creativity was an internal process. From there, he came to the conclusion that it was a way to redirect our feelings of aggression and sexuality to something more socially acceptable, like a type of creative work. This evolved into the idea that the conscious mind gets in the way of the creative process and that creativity flourishes when the unconscious processes are permitted to grow and blossom undisturbed by conscious interference. I'm sure you've all heard of your favorite artist being intoxicated at one point or another, and that's exactly where this idea comes from. The artist is letting their unconscious take over for purely creative purposes. The point is, there's a lot of theories about where creativity comes from, but we'll be focusing on a combination of both the unconscious and the conscious with regard to creativity. It's widely believed that creation has 4 stages: preparation, incubation, illumination or inspiration, and finally, production or verification. In stage 1, preparation, basic information and skills are assembled. Stage 2, incubation, is a relaxed time during which the person does not work consciously to solve the problem, but when connections are unconsciously being made. Stage 3 is illumination or inspiration, depending on who you talk to. This stage is the eureka experience, when the person suddenly sees the solution or the emergence of the creative idea into the consciousness. Again, it almost always occurs when the mind is in a state of relaxation. And finally, stage 4 is production or verification, where creative insights are put into a useful form. As you can see, the creative process, aka the first 3 stages of creation, all employ the unconscious. In fact, there are a lot of theories that say that while consciousness can be used in the creation process, it's not necessary. So consciousness isn't needed for creativity, right? Wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. If the unconscious was all that was needed for creativity, animals would be more creative than people. Not to say that animals aren't creative. I mean, we've all heard stories of crows problem solving, but for now, humans hold the trophy for most creative. The Creativity and Consciousness essay concurs with this stance, stating, unconscious processes may generate an assortment of possible options, but consciousness is necessary to choose among them. It acts as a conduit by which an external cue enters the mind to set in motion the unconscious processes that do the rest of the work to produce the creative product. To support their theory, Baumeister, Schmeichel, and Duval performed 2 experiments. These experiments used something called the cognitive load procedure, which is the assumption that the conscious mind can only do one thing at a time. They wanted to see if creativity degraded when consciousness was preoccupied. The first experiment was a guitar experiment, where professional musicians had to improvise solos to beats that they had never heard before. These beats had a variety of key changes and chords, all things professional musicians should have no problem adjusting to. They had to perform solos under 3 different conditions. The first condition, which was just the control, was just the artist playing a solo. The second condition included a low cognitive load, where the artist had to play a solo while also counting by 1, starting from 15. And the third condition was a high cognitive load, where the artist had to count backwards from 913 by 6 while playing a solo. Then they had some judges who knew nothing about the circumstances under which each of these solos was created. Take a listen to them. The study found that the solos that had been performed under high cognitive load were rated significantly worse than solos from the other 2 conditions. Keeping on beat, staying in key, and adapting to key changes were not affected by high cognitive load, however, suggesting that each of these operations can be done with little to no help from the conscious mind. When their conscious mind was preoccupied by a menial arithmetic task, the musicians continued to do most things well. But the quality of their creative improvisation was a conspicuous exception in that it alone seemed to suffer. Overall, this experiment shows that while yes, the unconscious handles a lot of the automatic processes, consciousness is still vital for creativity. But like all things, one experiment doesn't really prove anything, so the boys went back in for round 2. In the next experiment, participants were asked to wear headphones and listen to 2 songs while drawing 2 pictures. Again, this experiment included the cognitive load procedure. For one of the songs, participants were asked to count how many times the word time appeared in the lyrics. The second song had no requirements, so it just played while the participant was drawing. In case you're wondering, the songs were time zone and 48 hours respectively, both by Negativland. The participants also had to include certain elements in each drawing. In the first, they had to include a house, a car, a person, and a tree. In the second drawing, they needed to include a building, a flower, an airplane, and a face. Once the songs ended, they had to stop drawing. All of these drawings were shown to judges who knew nothing about the experiment, and like last time, the drawings created under the high cognitive load were voted less creative than the ones made with just the time limit of the song. Also parallel to the guitar study, they found that preoccupying the conscious mind did not degrade everything. Both sets of pictures were rated for coherence with no difference, and with the use of more judges, they also concluded that subjects in both conditions used an average of 7 out of 8 different colors. In this sample at least, more creative did not mean more colorful. In both drawing and musical improvisation, creativity suffered when the conscious mind was preoccupied. There were a few more experiments done in this essay, some which focused on increasing creativity rather than degrading it using consciousness, and I highly recommend that you give it a read because it was super easy to understand and very accessible. Speaking of, all sources used, unmentioned, and mentioned in this video are linked in the description below. So what's the connection between creativity and consciousness? As you can see, creativity comes from the combination of the conscious and the unconscious, both of which are necessary for the creative process. But now that we know that consciousness is imperative to creativity, it makes you wonder, if you increase your consciousness, does your creativity level rise? And on top of that, how does it physically change your brain? Well, according to famous director David Lynch,
if you have a golf ball size consciousness, when you read a book, you'll have a golf ball size understanding. When you look out, a golf ball size awareness. And when you wake up in the morning, a golf ball size wakefulness. But if you could expand that consciousness, then you read the book, more understanding. You look out, more awareness. And when you wake up, more wakefulness. It's consciousness. And there's an ocean of pure, vibrant consciousness inside each one of us.
As you can see, David's got some really strong opinions about consciousness, but I think he makes a really good point with the golf ball comment. If you're open to receiving more information, if your scope for receiving more information is wider, then you're guaranteed to receive more knowledge. Whether it's for ideas or thoughts or feelings, the point is the bigger your box, the more you can fill it with. And he's not the only one that thinks that. The easiest or most commonly known way to expand your consciousness is to meditate. David Lynch does it, Steve Jobs, Yoko Ono, Jerry Seinfeld, Hugh Jackman, and I think Matt DeVella since the end of his 30-day challenge, but anyway, the list goes on. All of them swear that meditation not only increases their creativity, but increases their overall quality of life. And celebrity endorsement aside, science backs that. In this article, Dr. Nancy Andreessen performs the first observable examination of inner neural activity during free association, which is, for example, when you show someone a picture and they tell you the first word that pops into their head. As the baseline task for this experiment, they instructed participants to relax and simply think about whatever came into their mind. Participants did this while in a PET scan, during which the activity of their brains was monitored. This relaxed state is similar to meditation as well as the incubation period of creation. In this experiment, they found that during free association, different parts of the brain interact and converse in a free and uncensored manner, which suggests that this is unique to this state of mind. Not only that, but there are also studies that show that meditation physically changes the brain. In this article, researchers at Harvard, Yale, and MIT conducted brain scans, which showed that experienced meditators have increased thickness in parts of the brain that deal with attention and processing sensory input. Sarah Lazar, the leader of this study, as well as a psychologist at Harvard Medical School, says, "Our data suggests that meditation practice can promote cortical plasticity in adults in areas important for cognitive and emotional processing and well-being." In this experiment, the researchers compared the brain scans of 20 meditators to 15 non-meditators. During scanning, the meditators meditated and the others just relaxed and thought about whatever they wanted. Similar to what happened in Andreessen's experiment, even just letting your mind wander can do a lot of things for your brain in the creative process. In another article, Lazar mentions that she did a second study to follow up this one. They took people that had never meditated before more, and for 8 weeks, had them take a mindfulness-based stress reduction program. And the results mirrored what they had found in the last experiment. In the group that learned meditation, they found thickening in 4 regions of the brain. They found the biggest change in the posterior cingulate, which is involved in mind wandering and self-reverence. Next, they found thickening in the left hippocampus, which assists in learning, cognition, memory, and emotional regulation. The third place that they found thickening in was the temporal-parietal junction, or TPJ, which is associated with perspective taking, empathy, and compassion. And finally, an area of the brainstem called the pons, where a lot of regulatory neurotransmitters are produced. While it didn't thicken, the amygdala, the fight or flight part of the brain, which is important for anxiety, fear, and stress in general, got smaller in the group that participated in the mindfulness-based stress reduction program. The change in the amygdala was also correlated with a reduction in stress levels. Okay, so at the very least, science has proven that increasing your consciousness by way of meditation changes the physicality of your brain and increases your quality of life, at the very least, by reducing stress. Circling back to the question of does expanding your consciousness increase your creativity, I'm voting yes. Aside from the celebrity endorsements, changes in the physical brain support this. All of the parts of the brain whose gray matter thickened in Lazar's 8-week experiment were connected to creativity. And therefore, I believe that if you increase your consciousness or expand your consciousness, that your creativity will follow and increase as well. If you're interested in learning more about consciousness or creativity, check out one of these links, and I'll see you next week for my video, Someone Called Me a Karen the Other Day, aka the history of Karens.